All right, Will sends through this question and he says, what do you do when someone in your team isn't self-aware? How do you handle it? I think self-awareness is such an interesting thing because one of the reasons we find those conversations particularly challenging is because it's about a blind spot. And when we're talking about a blind spot, it feels a lot more heightened because of, like, obviously I'm stating the obvious, people aren't aware of it. So we have to bring something to their awareness that they just don't know. As opposed to, let's say you're having a conversation with someone about their terrible attention to detail and they already know that that's a problem. So that conversation feels a lot lower stakes because they know and you know, and you're just trying to move through it and make a way through that. Noel Birch has this amazing chart. I wish I could show you a visual of what it looks like. It's this chart where he talks about conscious incompetence versus unconscious incompetence. So if you think about this thing of like, where I'm consciously incompetent about my skill in maths. Like, I know I'm not good at maths. I also know that I don't know my right from my left. Like, I'm consciously incompetent in those areas. The things that are hardest to talk about with an employee or a team member are the areas of incompetence that they're not aware of. And that's why trying to address an issue like a lack of self-awareness feels particularly difficult because you're taking something and you're like, gee, this is going to feel painful. They don't know, and I'm going to have to let them know. So I want to just first and foremost say it's challenging, it's difficult. Let's just get that clear. Then what do we do? How do we actually bring this up with someone? So I would actually say, in previous episodes, we've talked about the idea of framing. How do you position a conversation like this? So you might say something to the effect of, hey, I would love to have a conversation with you about something I've noticed that I think might be holding you back in your career. So make it important to them. Now, if this person reports to you, let's say you're their manager and you know they want to progress in their career, call that out. So if let's say Jack reports to me and I've identified that he lacks some self-awareness. This is what I would say. In our regular one-on-one, I would frame it like this. Hey, Jack, I know you've identified that you want to progress into a more senior role and I want to help you get there. I'm really committed to doing that. I've noticed a key skill gap that I feel is going to hold you back, and can we have a conversation about that, because I think it's really important that we work through this. Now, what I've done there is I've asked for his permission to have that conversation, which in most cases, everyone's going to be like, yes, because you've told them, I know you want to progress to another role, and if we don't address this, you're not going to get there, so let's have that conversation. The way you've framed that is you've positioned it in a way that it's helpful to them. It's not just helpful to you because you need to address it because the self-awareness is probably causing all these problems, or the lack of self-awareness is causing problems. It's also beneficial because you're framing it in the way that helps them grow and learn. And so I want to just start there. That's how you position the conversation. There's a couple of things you can do to help someone build their self-awareness. The first thing is you've got to make the unconscious conscious. So you're going to start this conversation by saying, hey, I've just noticed this trend in certain moments where there seems to be a lack of awareness about how you're showing up. And it may not be your intent, but this is the impact of that behavior. So let's say in meetings, they keep interrupting people. They keep cutting people off, and they're just not aware that they're doing that. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, I don't think it's your intent to interrupt people, but I've noticed this trend where when this person's speaking, you tend to cut them off. The impact of that behavior is that that person's voice doesn't get heard, but also it comes across as dismissive and rude. What you're doing, you're not saying you're being dismissive and rude, but you're saying the behavior comes across in this way. How we're positioning that is we're letting them know that there's this thing of maybe a lack of reading the room, a lack of self-awareness that's actually holding them back in their career. And unless they confront that and work on that, they're going to have a ceiling. They're not going to get to that next level of progression. So there's a few keys here. Key number one is show why this conversation is useful and beneficial to them. Key number two is talk about actual examples. Give them a specific. In this meeting, you cut Sarah off 3 times and the impact of that was that XYZ. You came across as rude or dismissive, whatever it is. By doing that, you're actually then bringing the thing that they're unaware of to their conscious awareness. And then what you're going to do is talk through some actions and some strategies to help build the skill of self-awareness. It's not enough just to raise it as an issue. It's not enough to just go, hey, this happened. This is the problem. Can we talk it through? We now need to move to action. And if you're in a management role, you must, and we think about this as feeding forward. How do we start to look forward? Instead of just feedback where we're looking back on all the issues, you're now going to start to feed forward and think, okay, what can we do differently next time? And so one thing I would be, if I was coaching this person, Jack, around how they stop interrupting people, one strategy I would have with Jack, and I use this with a lot of leaders we work with, is I would say, hey, Jack, I want you to do something for me in meetings. I want you to, when you feel the need to jump in to a conversation, when you feel like you really need to urgently say something, I want you to do this thing for me. Feel the back of your seat chair. So right now, sit back, feel the back of your seat chair. And what that does is it signals to your brain that you're going to wait for that person. And it's and actually I've talked about this before, but they train you in this in mediation. So it stops you from interrupting people and jumping in. So when we're about to speak, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you would see this play out. When I go to speak, I actually lean in closer to the mic because I get excited. I get like into the conversation with myself and you listening on the train or on the car. And so I lean in, I get closer to the mic. Whereas when you feel the back of your seat chair, what that does, it's a signal in your body and it signals to your brain that I'm actually listening and engaging and I'm not going to jump in and speak. So if someone's struggling with interruptions and interrupting people, that is a strategy I would use and ask them to use to help correct or rectify some of that behavior that they're finding is unhelpful. One strategy. Now, that is thinking about an action. The other way you can think about action and how we feed forward and give them strategies to build their self-awareness is we can actually ask them to reflect on what is going on for them in that moment. So we might say, hey, when you're in those situations and you feel like you're about to jump in a meeting and maybe interrupt someone, what's going through your mind? So just asking curious questions, what's going through your mind? And often people will say things like, oh, I urgently had this thought and I felt if I didn't say it then and there, I'd forget it. And then what you can do is you can have a coaching conversation where you start to go, okay, cool. What if when you have those moments, we've got the notepad and pen and you actually scribble it down? What if we try this type of strategy instead so that you don't lose that train of thought? Because that is one reason why people interrupt, because they're worried about losing their train of thought. So just having these conversations where you're using coaching questions can help people to start to reflect on their own behavior.